Nate Sedgwick. I appreciate you, brother, coming on the Parables, man.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, guys, Nate is a good friend of mine. He is in the RTA Syndicate, the entrepreneurial group that I'm in, founded by Andy Frisell and Ed Milet. My man over here flew all the way from China to come on the Parables. No, he had some business going on, but thank you so much for squeezing me in.
Of course.
Dude, it was a pleasure to finally meet you at the event. You know, we've been going back and forth online, and you know, I know you're doing lots of good things, man. You're in a very interesting position right now with your business. I see you making some, you know, massive moves. Mm-hmm. And dude, I congratulate you, man.
Thank you. Yeah.
Dude, it's you got a lot of stuff going on, and you know, I think your expertise is going to be very, very interesting. But also, obviously, we're going to get into like, you know, your company and exactly what you guys do. Mm-hmm. But definitely, I wanted to talk about a lot about the mindset behind that too, because you've been entrepreneur for how long now?
I think almost my entire life. I mean,
your entire life.
Along the way, sure, I've held some positions before I went to China, like working in high school and then when I was in university. But you know, it's constantly been this this mindset of trying to find the right path to keep climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
And eventually, I got off the ladder and started climbing my own ladder.
There you go.
And that's, you know, I've been on that path for maybe 15 years now.
Man, dude. So you have quite the journey, and I can't wait to dive into it. Let's kind of start from the beginning. I like my audience to kind of, and for me too,
sure,
obviously to get to know a little bit more about you. We usually find definitely some connections from like kind of your upbringing and, you know, how you grew up, and definitely see that connection to what's led to your success so far. So let's start off like, where did you grow up, and how was that like, and moving on to your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I'm sure the way that I grew up, like most of us, had an immense impact on me, just because that's kind of what we went through, is the stories we tell about ourselves, right? And sometimes that can be extremely self-limiting, other times very empowering. So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up, I would consider ourselves lower class. When I was 4 years old, my parents got divorced because my father was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. And so I was raised by my mother. She raised my brother and I. And
so just two of you, right?
Correct,
okay.
The two of us. And there was never a time where like we were starving, but there were times where like we're living in our like our aunt's house, our grandpa's house, until eventually we got an apartment. And then for many years, you know, going to the church pantry to get food. I never felt like I was without, because it was just, as you know, like normal. Like your life as a kid is just what your life is.
Yeah.
But you know, that's what it was. And my mom did the best that she could as a single mom, trying to raise two boys by herself, working full time, and then coming home and raising us. And so I grew up in that type of environment. So I don't think privileged at all, and basically with nothing. And I think that really had a massive impact on me, because where I grew up in kind of suburban Cincinnati, but being on the lower rung of that, I was always deeply ashamed of kind of feeling poor and being from the poorest house, and like not having anything, and when comparing myself to others, you know, whether that was right or wrong to do. And so I created this deep sense of, I think, shame associated with that, and which also affected my self-worth. And so
so it sounds like it played a huge role in your self-esteem and confidence, obviously, right? Because you kind of, like you said, you were embarrassed a little bit of kind of maybe where you came from, and comparing yourself to other kids or people you grew up with.
Right, and always trying to figure out like, why me? Why my family? Like, why is my family fucked up? Which I'm sure a lot of people do, right?
Yeah.
But and it wasn't like the worst childhood. I mean, there were lots of great lots of great things about it. But as far as like, you know, kind of the mindset or where I was, that's kind of where I grew up. And so at a very young age, I mean, I got my first job, I think when I was 8 years old or 10 years old, doing a paper route. And then eventually when I was 14 years old, working at Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh, man. Yeah. And the paper route too, and that cold, man, you must have like thick skin, man.
Cincinnati's not too bad, but yeah.
Okay. So Chuck E. Cheese also? Okay, so you started working at such a young age, it sounds like.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think from a very early age, it was like, okay, well, this is what it is, and you got to work to make money to buy things, and so that was kind of ingrained in me. And I think one of the things that perhaps saved me was, I mean, I'm not a fan of Hollywood these days or the media, but growing up as a kid and watching certain movies that kind of tell the story of the American dream, and there's so many like rags to riches stories.
Yeah.
People who come from nothing that made it, and I think that was also ingrained in my psyche. So growing up, there was never this sense of defeat. Like I had these feelings of shame associated with being poor and self-worth issues, but at the same time, I think deep within that was like there's a way to overcome. Many people have overcome. It's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah.
And so that was part of the mindset, and I think that's what's driven like my entrepreneurial journey from a very young age. Was like, okay, just go out and do it.
Yeah, you see, you saw opportunity, like you knew there was opportunity out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're the oldest. You were the oldest of your or youngest.
Yeah, I'm the oldest. I have a younger brother who's a year and a half younger than me.
Okay,
yeah,
so it sounds like being a single mom. It sounded like you kind of had to step up. You knew like you had to work. Is that that's the sense I'm getting a little bit?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, growing up, what were you into? Like, I'm curious, like, because, we're going to be talking about all the expertise and the stuff that you do now. I want to kind of figure out, like, were you like this, this sourcing, like, I don't know, expert or something, like, at a young age? Or, like, what were you, like, kind of into, I guess you could say?
Man, I think just very normal stuff that kids were into, which is, like, sports, like Little League baseball, basketball, like, a lot of sports. Never great at anything. I mean, I did football, tennis, and that was. But as far as like foreseeing my interest in doing product sourcing, supply chain, or like anything to do with China or Asia or Eastern culture, it was like nothing.
Right?
Nothing at all.
Like no connection.
Yeah, no connection at all.
Yeah. So and then so you went to you graduated high school, and then you went to college, or
that's right. So going through high school, my mom, she has a high school education, and she's just worked like heck, and she's a very a woman of deep faith.
Okay.
And so she's always had this dream that she would have her own house for her and her boys. And when I was 17, she finally got a house from you don't get a house, but she was qualified to buy a house through Habitat for Humanity.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically a nonprofit organization that helps lower income families obtain housing that otherwise they might not be able to get due to income issues or other things through traditional means.
Sounds like government funded.
No, it's not. It's a nonprofit.
Oh, nonprofit.
Yeah, nonprofit.
Okay.
So, but it was once again, it was one of those things where at the time, like, man, I was like, fuck, like, I was ashamed of it, and now I look back and I'm just so proud of her and admire her deep faith. But it was just I don't know what drove that necessarily, but it was just something that kind of was always there, part of that story. So eventually I graduated high school, went to Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, and I got my undergraduate there in political science. And
political science, interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think got you into that? Like,
well, I think and this points to like how important it is to have mentors and to be a mentor to other people, because I think. And one thing that I didn't mention, I can't believe I didn't mention, is like growing up not having a father, a father figure. I mean, when I look at the problems in society and culture, like my own life, that the chaos that's been caused is just the fatherhood issue, the lack of importance placed on fatherhood, not having someone to teach you how to be a man, to be a husband, to be a father, and trying to figure out, and where do you learn that from?
Figure it out on your own.
Like movies, Hollywood. Oh my God, like no wonder it's like chaotic in society. Like there's so many problems.
And it seems like that kind of norm of what a father is or a husband or the man is always changing or shifting too, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, again, like you were the older brother. You felt like you had to step up a little bit. It sounds like. Yeah.
And so in high school, growing up in that environment, I was never like a very good student. I would say very average, like B's and C's. And then in high school, I came across this program called Model United Nations. And I was like, well, that just sounds really cool. And it's basically like this organization where you participate and you learn about the different countries around the world. And then they have a conference, and like you go as a representative of that country, and you pretend like there's a mock United Nations, and you go and like debate these things. And like I really found like a passion for it, and I was interested in it. Yeah. And so that stuck with me. So when I went to Wright State University and I was there, man, I kind of like went down the wrong path of like, frats and partying, and like
everyone goes through that phase, right?
Yeah. I did not take it serious at all. I'm just like, this is the next step, and I'm just gonna go and I'll take all these student loans, and I'm just gonna, kind of like, you're kind of like on this path, like, which a lot of mainstream society is, where like, okay, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to get my loans, and then somehow I'm going to get this job, I'm going to pay off those loans, I'm going to get my house. And so I was kind of like in that sheep mindset, or like that kind of like predetermined path at the time. But one of the things that I think saved me was, once again, I found Model United Nations at the university, and then I participated in that, and that like was a whole new level. And this was an organization that really pushed academic excellence, and was a great training ground to understand, different cultures around the world and how big the world was out there. And I got to participate in a conference in New York City, which before that I never traveled anywhere except Florida, and you drove down there.
Yeah.
There was no flying.
Yeah. Dude, I want to just real quick, I want to add, like, I think that's so awesome in the fact that, because, growing up, I mean, to me, I feel like not a lot of people are globally aware. Like, like they're just kind of stuck with where they live. And I almost feel like that too a little bit growing up. Like, I didn't get to travel. I mean, I traveled here and there, but not everywhere, where like I feel like a lot of people had the privilege to really learn about the world. So that's awesome that you were able to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're totally correct. And it's because of adults and people who were willing to mentor and to give their time, right, to teach these students about the world, that now like it, has a big impact. You have to keep that in mind. And so that was how I first really got very interested in international politics. And so when I graduated, I applied for graduate school, and I got rejected. And I said, well, I'm not staying here. I'm not going to stay in Ohio and just do this. And so I applied again, and I got in the second year. And so I think that's a very important thing, is a lot of people, including myself back then, but when you encounter failure, you're like, okay, well, I'm not good enough, or, oh, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Instead of the mindset like, okay, so that wasn't, I need to adjust the path. I need to try different ways. I need to do more.
Have a backup plan, or just stay busy, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, but during that time, like I was working all the way through university, jobs. I got a job at Starbucks. I worked my way up to store manager of the highest grossing store in the Dayton area by the age of 22. Hoorah. Yeah. And I remember I really wanted to get into graduate school because I wanted to do something more meaningful. And I remember dude, being a store manager, working full time, going to school full time, it's
that's tough,
serious work. Yeah. And I remember being out in the parking lot, taking the trash cans out and spraying them out, looking up at the stars, man,
what's next?
There's so much more out there. Yeah. This is not it. I'm going to go to the next level. I had no idea what it was. And you talked about that, you're I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. I kind of have an idea, and it's okay not to know.
Yeah.
But you just got to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And so I kept that mindset, and so I kept pushing forward, got into graduate school, and then I left job full time, just took on a bunch of student loans, and that's where I got my first opportunity to study abroad. Yeah.
So how did studying abroad? Well, first off, I find it so interesting. I don't know why that you worked at Chuck E. Cheese and then you're a store manager at Starbucks, man. That's crazy. But you know what? I think I think a lot of people, especially, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening to this right now who are in that same boat, right? Yeah. They're going to school, or maybe they're trying to pursue a career, a passion, whatever it may be, and they're trying to stay afloat, right? They're working their side job. But I cannot stress, and I know you could agree to this, how much that's going to play a huge role when moving forward, right? Because it teaches you a lot. It teaches you a lot about emotional resilience. It teaches you how to prioritize your time. It teaches you how to maybe perhaps build thick skin, right? I'm sure you going through that has played a huge role into what leads to what you start to do next.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you quit, right? Or you basically
I resigned. I'm I'm going to go to graduate school full time. Yeah.
And then where did your journey take you next?
Yeah, so at that point, I'm studying international and comparative politics, had to pick a focus. And at the time, this is around 2005, 2006, China was they had joined the World Trade Organization. Their economy is growing fast. It's in all the news.
Around what year is this?
2005, 2006,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, they joined the WTO in 2001, but they were just more and more prevalent. And I was just man, that just seems, I knew nothing about China.
Yeah.
And I'm it just seems so fascinating, this completely different culture. The language looks absolutely beautiful. And I was just like, you know what, I'm going to go all in because this is just an area of importance, both economically and politically. And like, this is going to be fun to study. And that's just how I chose it. And then I started to study. And then there was this opportunity to study abroad. And that was a very difficult decision because at this time, I had a longtime girlfriend, several years, who didn't really want me to go because I was going to be gone for 6 months.
Yeah.
My mom, who I'm like, I'm going to go to China. And she's like, oh my God, the communists are going to kidnap you and torture you.
Well, that's not, and then leave your family too.
Yeah. I mean, she's thinking like Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and I'm thinking of like, I don't know, Fortune 500 companies in China. Yeah. And
she's just being a mom. She's just, from what she hears and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And at the same time, like, I don't have any money. Like, I'm maxed out on student loans, and so I had all these reasons not to go. And I went to go see the director of our department. And I was like, I'd really like to go, but I've got all these responsibilities. She's like, Nate, do you foresee another time in your life when you're ever going to have less work to do, less responsibilities, less kids, less things? And I'm just like, okay, well, no, you answer my question. And so once again, like a mentor at that exact moment, kind of like nudging me in the right direction to make the right choice, and that made all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
So that's when I went on the first time to study abroad in a place called Dalian.
Yeah, could you imagine if you, like we just talked about having a mentor, you just put an emphasis on how important it was. Imagine if that mentor or just one person just didn't give you that push. What if they just said, oh yeah, maybe you should think about it, right? You wouldn't be doing what you're doing right now, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Dude, that's nuts. So you started, so you flew out there and you stayed there for 6 months?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. And tell me about that. Tell me about what you learned, anything, interesting. How was it going there? Obviously, it was your first time being there. How was that?
First time in a foreign country. And then I went to this city, which is probably like a second or third tier city. And then not just like to the major city, but like to one of the remote locations, which was in an economic development zone. So the entire experience was completely shocking because the best way to think about it is like, think about it. You're entering it's almost like a different world.
Absolutely.
Because it's a totally different culture. Everyone looks totally different from you. They're speaking a totally different language, eating completely different food. And so like all facets of your reality are now completely new. And the best way I can think of it is it's not like a high feeling, but like your neurons are just like blasting because you're constantly going through this sensory overload in every possible cell of your being.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so from that sense, it's a rush. It's just an incredible experience. And so going over there and seeing what it was like to be in a developing country, and the poverty and the growth and kind of like the differences in that, and then to actually meet foreigners in a foreign country. And I was working with a lot of college students and really just understanding like how similar we are and then what differences there are, and going through that experience. It was just, oh man, it was almost hard to put into words, but just opening a book for the first time or like seeing a movie in color for the first time.
And not knowing what to expect.
Right, because I'd been in Ohio for the first 24 years of my life. I had only been to like Florida, like to Panama City or something.
It sounds like you had like, there was a culture shock, but you were also like low-key excited. That's kind of what I'm getting a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I just went in with like an open mind to soak everything up and to learn as much as I could about the culture and the language and the people. And it was just an incredible experience. And by the time I came back in the winter, I come back to Ohio and it's like cold and dreary and gray.
You're like, God damn it.
And it's like Ohio.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, Ohio has a lot of beautiful things about it.
Yeah.
But
and that's home,
Yeah. But there's also the history there of like, once again, having this like the stories I told myself about being poor and like the history with my father and like, things that also made me uncomfortable. Yeah. So going from like, here's me on this new journey in this incredible place, just like mapping out new destinations and literally writing the story, versus like, okay, now I'm going back to like the history books. Yeah. And like I'm plunged back into this darkness. Yeah. Like, that's literally how I felt. Yeah. And so I got back and like right away I got the itch. I'm like, I got to get back out. And
well, I think you already knew that you didn't want to maybe, I don't know, start your career or spend the rest of your life in Ohio.
Right. Yeah, I didn't want to just like graduate and get a job as like, I don't know, like a manager of a retail store or something. Nothing wrong with that, like if that's what you do, but
Yeah.
it wasn't for me. Like I needed
You knew you wanted
to go
more.
far beyond that, and to explore more. And so
So you got that itch to
and
go back.
very quickly, like I signed up again, but this time I wanted to explore Japan. And so
Nice.
I applied to go to Japan, but this was around the time of the swine flu. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And Japan closed its borders to Americans. And so very quickly I reapplied and I got accepted to study in Shanghai. And so I studied again in Shanghai. And it was this time that before I went to Shanghai, I met with my aunt who had a lifelong friend there who was a private equity investor. And she's like, hey, I'll introduce you to him. He can show you around town, see what it's all about. And this was my second year in graduate school. I was about to get out. And like this time I was determined. I was like, I got to get a job here because I don't want to go back. Like I just want to like be out and do international business, specifically like international business in China. There's fortunes to be made. It's just exciting. Like
In China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's fortunes to be made. I mean, everybody's making money. It's crazy.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. It's crazy how that path led you back to China.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're supposed to go to Japan.
Right.
And it led you back. That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, and there's more to that too, which I'll circle back to. But so I was about to get out of graduate school, and I developed a really good relationship with this guy, and so he let me join his company. And one of the Chinese companies that he was looking to invest in manufactured food packaging, and he's like, okay, well
Nice.
here's like a position you could do. Go and meet them, see what the company's all about, and we're trying to help them develop their international sales. Basically, help them overcome the time, language, cultural gaps to grow much more quickly. And so I was assigned to basically travel around the world to like international exhibitions,
Okay.
like Dubai, Paris, London, New York.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but keep in mind, like I'm broke, dude.
Yeah.
I got nothing. Like I'm like submitting, like okay, we're going here, but I'm seeing the world and like I'm on my path, right? So I got to work for him and I started working for that firm. And what happened was the sales manager from that food packaging company would always go too, right? It was her responsibility, and she just happened to be like an incredibly beautiful, intelligent woman, and the chairman's daughter. And we developed a great friendship traveling around the world. And then like the rest was history. Like we fell in love.
Oh,
and then I
nice.
asked her to marry me. And I can tell you, like I remember the first time I met her because I was in Shanghai and I flew down to the factory to meet her. And I was like, oh my God, like she's so incredible.
Yeah.
And like, but keep in mind, EJ, this is once again, like if you want to tap into like my mindset coming from nothing, seeing that and like I was like I have to win her heart, like this is the girl of my dreams, and I got set on that. And it's like this was like something that should have been completely unattainable. I'm in China, right?
Yeah.
She's the chairman's daughter. She's incredibly beautiful, and I maybe she learns about me and she's like, okay, like your family is, maybe she looks down on me or something.
Yeah.
But regardless, like I was just like, I'm all in. And part of that too is like having nothing to lose, right? Growing up, having nothing to lose, being in college, like maxed out, nothing to lose.
See,
It's
do you
like,
see the connection there? Like that's where that's why I wanted to
Yeah.
dive in so much. But
Yeah.
I completely resonate with you because when I found my wife, I didn't take no for an answer. It was like, I mean, I don't know if I had a lot. Well, to me, like I don't know if it's safe to say I had a lot. I didn't have anything to lose. But I mean, like I totally resonate with what you're trying to say. And it's interesting though, if you think about it, you found your career in China, and then you found your wife in China.
and circle that back to, if it wasn't for the swine flu, I would have never met my wife.
Oh yeah.
I never would have been in China. Maybe I would have never found that job in China.
Yeah.
Started my company. I want to be here with you right now.
Yeah.
That's just the way life works.
Yeah, that's crazy how your path kind of takes its course.
Right. So everything's for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the trip to Japan was canceled. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to go to Asia again.
Yeah.
Or like, oh man, life sucks.
Mm-hmm.
I
I find it interesting too, because I find it interesting how some people get attached, like obviously from a different country, just fall in love with a different country, kind of like maybe what you did. Like your path led you to China, and obviously you have a love for China, I would imagine, right? It's the same thing. I have a cousin who was born in Japan, but then grew up in the U.S. And then he actually, I think, does international business with Japan too. And it's kind of like, I don't know, Angelina Jolie in Cambodia. Like I find it interesting, like how people find that love, whether it's like the universe worked their magic and had you like you go to China, or maybe like there was just like something that drew them towards that culture. And
Yeah.
it sounded like not only the universe brought you to there, but it sounded like also you were drawn to the culture. It sounded like.
Yeah,
How was that
absolutely.
cultural barrier, by the way? I forgot to ask you that. Like you didn't speak the language
Right.
yet, I would imagine.
I had studied some in university, so
Okay,
I did,
gotcha.
but it wasn't until I actually started living there and getting immersed that I became much more conversationally fluent.
Yeah, and you had to, of course. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Otherwise, it's kind of like it's weird, right?
yeah,
You're a foreigner working there and you don't speak the language. Like that's pretty lazy, bro.
yeah, yeah. I know, right? It's like who's
You need
this guy?
first of all, you need to go all in. Like this is life. Like level up.
Yeah,
First of all, second of all, if you want to dominate in business and relationships, you need to learn the language.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Once again, I just attracted to it. The people over there are just incredibly nice to Americans. They love Americans. Like the Chinese people are incredible people, and very nice. And if you go over there and build, and much as everywhere around the world, like if you get to know people one on one individually or societies, like it's great relationships. And the same way that Americans kind of separate politics, the Chinese do too as well. Like you can say, well, that's a government thing. The governments are clashing, but it's not it's never a personal thing. And in all my time over there, I've never had any open hostility towards me at all. If anything, both in university studying abroad and then business, like I was always like put on a pedestal. Like people were
Interesting. Like they welcomed you.
extremely nice to Westerners. Yeah.
That's interesting because I almost feel like I mean I could be just putting it out there, but I guess just the way I see it, sometimes us as Americans we treat foreigners in a different manner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's funny how
Yeah.
that's backwards a little
Well,
bit.
so one funny thing would be like, all right, maybe, and I'm not trying to stereotype, but
Yeah.
but it's funny, like Americans, we're known for like if you're dealing with like foreigners here, not everybody,
Yeah.
but like it's like, hey man, why don't you speak American?
Yeah.
English, yeah. But in China, like if you go over there and you just say like ni hao, like hello or thank you or something, that everybody you talk to, wow, and they'll tell you in China, wow, your Chinese is so amazing. And like they smile and they're so happy that you've taken the time to like learn a little bit of their language, to learn a little bit of their culture, and they're extremely like friendly oriented toward Westerners. Whereas in America, at least we have this like stereotype where it's like, come on, bro, you're here. Why don't you speak?
Yeah.
Why don't you speak
It's like, fuck,
fluent
speak English. Yeah, and
speak
it's
fluent
like-
English. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So that was it's a big difference.
So you found your wife,
Uh-huh.
and then let's talk about the phase getting into and maybe I'm jumping, I don't know.
Yeah.
The phase jumping into Sourcing Mojo.
Yeah, so I mean, the prerequisite to that was, basically once I got with my wife and we got married, I joined the family company.
Okay.
So my family owns three factories over there. One focused on technology, two focused on food packaging. And so I went to work for the family company, started as a salesperson, and then worked my way up to chief marketing officer. And I spent a total of about 7 or 8 years there.
Nice.
And really helped to grow the company a lot. So we were basically doing all exports, and I worked with companies in 50 plus countries around the world. And through that, I also got to travel all around the world. I've seen so many places. Real quick, Laguna Beach is still my favorite place in the world.
I saw that. Yeah.
But so that was there was a lot of good and bad there. First of all, you're in a family company, so there's a lot of politics. And then second of all is like seeing the way that Chinese factories operate, kind of how they negotiate, strategize, communicate, how they cut corners, maybe how they cheat sometimes, like all these things, learning about that. And then also like, just like my father-in-law, he started his business. He was an entrepreneur, like started with nothing, like dead broke when he was a kid. And he's built a very successful business. But once again, like he's a guy who's like managing these companies that have 1,000 employees, but it's still like run as like a single boss operation where it's not like, a lot of people who create their own companies, once they reach a certain size, there's like
There's a system.
There's a struggle, right, to like go to that next step where there's a system in
Yeah.
place versus like micromanaging everything. And so that was interesting to experience. And so anyway, I got a lot of great experiences. But at a certain point, I was ready to move on. The biggest thing that I took away was working for a Chinese company, I was sitting across the table of Westerners that were coming, Europeans, Americans, all types of companies from small importers to billion-dollar packaging companies. And what I saw was like all of them suffer from product sourcing issues. It could be like negotiating price, payment terms, quality control,
Well, why is
all
that?
these
Is there
things.
because there's a disconnect in the communication, or is it just maybe the way the companies ran? Is it them
Yeah.
having these weird expectations? Like where was the issue with that?
It's all of the above
Okay.
because actually international product sourcing is an extremely complicated process and there's
Okay.
many different details and pieces to the puzzle
Okay.
and it's extremely difficult to be good at everything. Like a billion-dollar company, they're very good at risk management and having quality control processes in place. But because they're so bureaucratic and they'll turn over buyers, like they might be paying 10 or 20% higher prices just because their guys they're not hungry, right?
Yeah.
They're a big bureaucratic organization. Whereas the small importer, he's trying to keep on every dime and he's like a hustler, doing everything to get
The
that best
negotiator,
price,
right?
right?
Yeah.
But then he's like got no idea about quality control and is doing nothing to like control for it or to like protect himself. I think it's both. It's like one, there's very few companies that are professional at the process, and then two, it's a very complicated process, and most people and businesses are learning as they go. Yeah,
You said about 8 years is when how much you spent there?
correct.
Yeah.
And there's some overlap too, where I started my company before I left, so I was like running both, doing a side hustle.
Yeah, yeah, there we go. There we go. Who hasn't, right? Yeah. What, I'm curious to know what within that around 8 year span, what do you think? I mean, you learned a lot obviously with the business, international business and dealing with other countries. What's something that you feel like you learned about yourself? Because again, you came to a foreign country.
Deep.
Yeah. I'm just curious because I
Yeah.
mean, like again, you came from Cincinnati. You know what I mean? You had this culture shock. You fell in love with the country. You found your wife. You learned so much. And then again, like just going back to who you were, like you were ashamed of, not ashamed, but you knew you wanted more. There was opportunity, and now it's kind of like you're on your own. You're doing big things. Like, what would you
Yeah.
say? Like some of the biggest lessons, or what are some of the things that you learned about yourself?
Personally, I would say after I'd been over there and kind of, when you're studying abroad, it's kind of fluffy, right? Because everything's bright and shiny, and you're kind of like going through the fun experience. When you live and work there and have a family there, it's a totally day in day out type thing at a Chinese factory in China,
Yeah.
among the Chinese workers. It's a totally different experience, and I would have to say like going through years of that and encountering a number of different circumstances, there are a lot of instances where like I was this bright-eyed guy from the Midwest with Midwestern values where
Yeah.
everybody's fair and you kind of like Midwesterners really project their values on other people. Like they see the best in other people that they see in themselves. And so I think there's a lot of naivete there, which is a good thing to an extent.
Yeah.
But in international business, it can be a very dark place. When you're dealing with a different culture that has different value systems and ethics, and you can't really say like they have bad ethics and you have good ethics. It's not so clear like that. It's
Yeah.
different value systems and the way they derive their ethics are different.
Yeah, it's different cultures too.
Exactly.
I would imagine. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So within that, and then encountering a number of circumstances along the way where you're dealing with different business issues, and there's a lot of like questions of integrity and things at play. Like that really was a defining moment in my life of kind of figuring out who I am, what are my values, what do I stand for,
Oh, I see.
what
Yeah.
am I doing, and then coming through that on the other side eventually, knowing who I am, how I want to live, how I want to operate my business, how I'm going to interact with the world. That was just a pivotal moment in my life that it was a process, but when I got out on the other side, it was like, oh, I understand what
Yeah.
this means and this is how I'm going to live.
That's awesome because
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, you got the exposure that I'm sure a lot of people will never have the privilege to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're working on your side hustle, like all the entrepreneurs
Yeah.
out there doing, keeping it under the rug, working
Yeah.
aside. So Sourcing Mojo,
Yeah.
again, is it safe to say it's an agency that helps these business owners and entrepreneurs source, products and factories and
Yeah.
all of Asia? Is that
Yeah,
kind
so
of what it is?
I mean, I call it a professional service firm.
Okay.
Similar to like an attorney, like you're hiring an expert to work for you in this particular field.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too familiar with the firm agency, so I'll just use that.
Uh-huh. Or maybe a broker,
Yeah.
right? A little bit.
I don't know. I just say professional service.
Yeah,
firm.
there we go. There you make. Hey, man, when you're an entrepreneur, you make up your own words, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what Sourcing Mojo does is, we're not buying and selling products. We're not making money from factories. What we do is, the easiest way to think of us is like a contracted China office. So
Yes.
with our corporate clients, what they do is they hire us, and we have dedicated experts that come from a manufacturing background. They're Chinese, obviously, speak fluent American English, and so they're working basically as our client's China office, and they're working with the home office, whether that's in the United States, the UK, Italy, whatever that is, and so they're facilitating the product sourcing process. And when you break that down, that's basically goes into like supplier research, product development.
That was the 4 steps, right?
Yeah,
of the-
quality
yeah.
assurance,
Okay.
and then supplier and order management, and helping facilitate all of that. And it's extremely effective. I mean, basically all of our clients they've been sourcing from China for a long time. It's never ending problems. It's a very difficult process to handle. And then of course the organizations themselves, they have their turnover and it's always training new people, and it's not very effective. And so like actually our clients have been doing it for a long time, and then they find us, or even like entrepreneurs that are trying to do it. Maybe they've ordered sample, they found a supplier on Alibaba. It's like so difficult to communicate. Maybe they've ordered samples and they're wrong. Like, and they're like, what the hell is this? Like,
Yeah.
this is way more difficult than I thought. And so that's how they find us. And that's how we provide a lot of value, because we're doing it on such a level of professionalism with the supplier research, like how we find all the potential suppliers, we qualify them, we get the best pricing, right? And then product development, making sure that you're getting products that are made to standard, that there's quality and performance standards in place, that before the product ships, that it's inspected and that's correct, like, doing all of these things.
So it sounds like it's for all types, right? It's for even beginners who are looking, and also well-established companies.
Absolutely,
that are
yeah.
looking. So you kind of touched on it a little bit. I can only imagine. I've heard stories, but what's the typical like story that you get from a client that says, hey Nate, for I guess the established clients, right,
Yeah.
or the ones that've been doing it. What's the typical story that people run into, so the audience can get an idea?
I mean, there's just so many issues,
Yeah.
man, in every aspect. I
Yeah.
mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So like let's
Or just give an example.
Yeah, sure. Well, maybe I'll touch on one or two. Like with supplier research, one of the clients that we started working for this year, and an Arate guy, I'll leave it at that. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not going to talk about the product,
Of
but
course.
he's been sourcing from China for a long time and working with specific companies, and I'm sure he thought he was doing pretty good. Like his business is doing great, growing very strong. And I had to, I was like, man, we can do this. Like, and I had to persuade him, and I did. And so we started working for him, and we were able to identify basically this industrial cluster of manufacturers that are making his product. And then we qualified them. Then we went out to visit the factory. We found out where his competitor is making their product. They're doing very high quality stuff, and we were able to get prices for the same product that were approximately 30% lower than what he's been paying for years. And when he had been paying 30% deposit, 70% on shipment, we negotiated net 30 terms. So now he's paying 100% 30 days after shipment. So for a company that wants to go, to grow 10x in the next few years, first of all, not leaving all that money on the table. Now you've got all that extra profit to reinvest, but then also the payment terms that improve your cash flow. So like that's one instance with supplier research. Another instance would be like with quality control. I mean, it doesn't matter the industry. Like
I think those are most of the horror stories I've heard. The quality control part.
Yeah, and I think a big issue is, once again, is like the companies are not very professional to implement quality and performance standards, and then how to hold factories accountable to them. And so what we do is we actually work with our clients to, whatever the product is, we'll create product data sheets spelling out every specification of the product, then quality and performance standards that need to be tested to. We'll get the factory to agree to it, our client to agree to it, because, I mean, remember this line, ambiguity will kill your business, because if you leave anything to ambiguity, if you don't spell out every detail, guess what? It's going to be wrong, and then you're going to be screwed. And it's not going to be the factory's fault because you didn't spell out the detail, right? And that's kind of the way the thinking is. One of the biggest things that Americans and Westerners in general think is like they'll ask the factory to do something, and then they'll do it a certain way. They're like, well, why'd you do it like that? That doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, yeah, from your point of view, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But like the factory over there, that it's not like this exactly, but the easiest metaphor, like it's like a robot. You type in the command. If you've left something out, they're not going to do it.
Yeah,
There's not like some intuitive logic. I mean, sometimes, but
So I was just going to ask you too. What should a client expect to do when they get into something like this? And it's exactly what you're getting into right now is that they need to provide every like inch of detail possible. Is what it sounds like.
Exactly. It's tough to learn because if you're a small business or even a medium-sized business, and it's like, how do you become an expert in product sourcing? What are you going to need on YouTube and watch a bunch of YouTube videos? I mean, I've gotten on there. First of all, you're going to waste months of your life getting piecemeal information, and then I see videos like about Alibaba hacks and stuff, and I'm just like, oh my god, like that's not teaching people truly how to professionally do their business.
Doing a huge disservice to people.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not trying to plug myself, but like we launched an online program, Sourcing All Stars, and I literally so it's like it's a do it yourself for people who like Sourcing Mojo's. We do everything for you, right? It's full-time service. We're going to handle the process for you. You can be as involved as you want, as not. Sourcing All Stars, I created the program literally for like entrepreneurs and small businesses so they can become experts on all aspects of it. Because if you're not, you don't even know what to look for, right? You could say, send me a sample. You get the sample. But in the future, if something's wrong, like you have to have product data, quality standards in place. You have to have both parties sign off on it. And even once you do that, you trust through verification. Like you're probably going to want to send a quality control inspector out there to inspect the goods, at least for the first couple of orders, if not all of them. So all these things. So
it sounds like there's a really solid system in place in order to get what the client needs. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and this is the culmination of 12 years of my knowledge and expertise, like witnessing both within like my family's company, as we were manufacturing product for hundreds of companies around the world, and like that wasn't a perfect operation. There were quality issues at times, like, and how that was handled and where all the gaps were, and then also all the things that our clients at Sourcing Mojo have gone through. That's how we've made such a buttoned up process from beginning to end of identifying all the suppliers, qualifying them, getting the best pricing, then putting in all the processes to make sure that everything is running smoothly throughout the entire process. Yeah.
Well, so a few things. One, don't ever feel ashamed to plug yourself in.
Okay.
Because really, no, it's just I'm very selective who I bring on here. You know what I mean? And I know you being an Ejay brother and what you stand for as far as the way you run your business, like it's high quality. Second thing I wanted to point out also is the fact that you were able to build this side hustle. And by the way, I don't think we got into it. How were you able to build your team? Like,
oh man, it was.
How many employees do you have now again?
Around 20.
20.
Yeah, approximately 20. That's a good question. So I was working. As I told you, I was broke when I left college, and then I started to work. I worked for the private equity firm, didn't make a lot of money there, and then I went to work for the family company. Man, I didn't get special treatment. Like I was making pretty average salary. Yeah. But I was saving my money, and I had this dream. Like I literally like where we are, and if you go on our website and like see our video, it talks a little bit about it. Like I would ride my bike every night. I'd see the Central Business District. I'm going to have a consulting firm in that skyscraper. So I took my life savings, which was, I don't know, like 40 grand at the time or something, and built this office. And I had one employee that I brought from my family's who had worked for me for a couple of years for my family company. And it was just me and her. Right. In this office that was built for like 15 people. And because I saw the future and like literally started from that. And then because I had built great relationships with CEOs of these packaging companies, I was able to bring on some clients. Yeah. But it wasn't like, and then everything was great. Like, first of all, there's like a ton of uncertainty. Yeah. And then you get it going, and like we had cash flow issues, and times were like, am I going to meet payroll, and like extremely stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, like we were talking before this podcast started, now we're doing pretty good. We're in a very strong growth phase, 20 employees, working with clients around the world. And I'm trying to take it to the next level again.
Yeah.
But it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. Like you're pulled in so many directions. There's so many things to focus on and build.
Yeah.
And so it never stops. But yeah, I mean, that's how the side hustle, it started with a dream. Like, first of all, like I don't want to work and just do packaging the rest of my life at my family's company. Like I want to like do something on my own, and like, this is where I can do it. This is where I can make a difference.
Yeah.
So I went out, I invested my money, I took the risk, and then I just sucked it up and built it. And I wasn't making, good money for the first couple of years for sure.
Of course, yeah.
But just building it out and slowly. And,
it takes time, right?
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
takes time. You know what's I like what you did. I know Edwin Arroyave. He's in the RTA Syndicate,
yeah.
and you guys basically had the same mindset of how you tackled it when you got your office. He had a similar story when he got a van, and he didn't have the employees to fill it. So he got the van, and he was like, okay, now that I got the van, I'm like, crap, I need to fill it with employees.
Yeah.
So that gave him the urge and the pressure. And I almost feel like you did that too. Like you got this big office that's supposed to hold like 15 people, and it was just you and your first person that
first
went
employee,
on with you.
Yeah.
And now you have what you said 20 employees.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like this year we actually doubled the size of our office again, and once again it's like we can't use it all immediately, but I have the vision for the company. I have the plan. I'm executing, and I know where we're going. And if you don't build it, it's going to be a lot more difficult. I don't know. I'm a similar mindset. Like I kind of like build it, and then it comes.
How have you? I'm glad you bring this up, and this is like totally just off the top of the dome. How have you been able to have that clarity and like sharpen that vision? Because I feel like sometimes, like at least for me, and I'm going to speak on behalf of myself, I have this vision too, right? And I feel sometimes it gets so big that I slowly get out of that tunnel, that I don't want to say a tunnel vision, like that sharpness. You know what I mean? Because your mind, like you said, the neurons are firing all over the place, right? You just want to do this, do that. You're a creator at heart, and you seem to have this sharp clarity. How have you been able to have build that? A Jeopardy question, huh? No,
yeah. No, good question. I mean, I think a lot of it is. This isn't going to be the answer that's going to help a lot of people, but I think there's a lot of gut instinct there. Like, well, maybe it will. You got to follow your gut, because you're going to encounter a ton of obstacles. It's going to be uncomfortable, but if you feel something in your heart or your gut that's like pushing you, like you got to follow that. Otherwise, you're just giving up your life. So I think that's a big part of it. The other thing too is like I just keep a very open mind. I'm trying to constantly monitor like how can we actually provide more value? How can we acquire more clients and build lasting relationships, right? And so we're constantly tweaking our models, and like with the online program, we've had a ton of entrepreneurs contact us, and they're not ready to invest, right? For us to work for them on a full-time basis. And the other thing too is even for the small businesses that are, if they don't understand the sourcing process, then it's more difficult for them to work with us because they don't know exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, they don't know what they're going to get themselves into.
Yeah, or if they discontinue using us in the future, then they're kind of, stuck up the river without a paddle because they still don't understand the sourcing process. So that was like foreseeing that, okay. Well, the other thing too is like understanding the trends out there, right? Like with the e-com, Amazon FBA bonanza, and there's so many people that are starting these online stores and businesses, and they know how to do that, but then it's like, okay, how do I source product? And why is my prices not competitive? And why is it so difficult to communicate with suppliers? And God, I have all these quality issues. Yeah. And so that's why I was just like, duh, like I need to create this program to teach entrepreneurs and not just entrepreneurs. I mean, we work with a lot of like $10 million companies that they're not professional at sourcing either, and they've hired us. But that's like
you saw a gray space.
Yeah, you just see a lot. Once you start looking for the opportunities, then you'll see them. You can't just like sit there and wait for them to bump you in the head.
Absolutely, yeah. I saw something. I was going through your Instagram, and I saw one of your posts, and I think I wrote it down here. It was when factories say "trust me" and it's good enough. I found that really funny. Yeah. Like, could you just expand on that real quick? Is that just like kind of like a red alert?
Yeah.
With factories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because like I'll ask a potential client, you know, well, what kind of like quality checks are you doing? Like, yeah, the factory says they're doing the quality check.
Yeah.
What?
You're like, what's that?
Like that doesn't mean anything,
Yeah.
right? You know? So I think, you know, just saying like, okay, what are your quality standards, and just or like the product, you know, this has this problem, and the factory's like, oh, you know, no, like we'll discount it 10% and you can sell. That happens a lot too. Like they'll ship defective product,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, we're so sorry, and we'll give you a 10 or 30% discount. But you're like, it's like a water bottle with a hole or something, you know?
Yeah.
You're like, are you guys brain dead? Like we can't sell this product.
Yeah.
So things like that.
This happened to one of my past guests. He got socks, and I think they sent him like 2 left socks, or like all left socks. So that's what they did. They discounted it, and I forgot how he got really creative to make it work. But I was just like, oh man, another horror story that I hear. You know what I mean? So, dude, that's awesome though. I mean, again, like not only, you know, again, you fell in love with the country, you built your business, but then also you definitely identified there's a market and a gap that needs to be addressed. You know, and I think also to add on to that, and what I love about you put a lot of emphasis on the relationships with clients. Can you describe to me, in your eyes, what's the ideal relationship that Sourcing Mojo should have with their client?
Yeah. So we want to build lifelong relationships with our clients, right? So first of all, before I get to that question, don't let me forget it.
Yeah.
Our work is extremely meaningful because, especially now, as we've been working for corporations for a long time, but recently we've opened it to entrepreneurs. And so I'm constantly on the phone talking to entrepreneurs. Man, they're so passionate about their dreams and this and that. And they've got so much riding on it, right? They're investing their life savings, or they're doing this or that. And you want to, it's such a pleasure to relate to someone who's in, you know, a similar path as you, and to have a meaningful impact on their lives. Because one way to do it would be like, okay, they pay us such amount of money. You want a quotation? Here's an Excel sheet with a quotation. The other way to do it is like, okay, who are you? And I'm me. And what are you trying to accomplish?
How can we help you grow?
Right. And like to actually be sincere with like, what is your objective, and to do that. And so it's extremely meaningful work. So at Sourcing Mojo, we're trying to build lifelong relationships so that we can be the basically the Asia sourcing office for corporate clients, but also for a lot of our entrepreneurs that they'll hire us for a couple months, and we just work month to month, no contracts. So like maybe their order ships, and then they'll stop for a little bit. But what happens a lot is like they'll find other product categories to add, or they'll come back to us. And so we want them to be successful, so that as they grow, they need us more and keep coming back to us. And then eventually they're so successful that we're just their full-time sourcing office, you know, and that they never leave us.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, and this may be might be a long answer. It might take a whole new podcast episode. I'm just curious, what maybe I could shorten the question a little bit. What's something that we need to, I guess, business owners and people who need to source their supplies and all that stuff through, a factory in Asia? How, what can they do to prepare with all the trade war and tariff stuff that's happening right now?
Okay, with the trade war stuff, it depends on the product category, because a lot of product, well, I would say a lot, but there's many products in China that are not readily available outside of the country. Okay. Like even Apple and the iPhone, they couldn't just suddenly, well, I don't think the tariffs have been enacted much on the iPhone, if at all. Yeah. But they want to be able to just move their supply chain, right? Because they've got these massive systems in place, like all these engineers in China, like the entire supply chain is over there. Yeah. So depending on the specific product, it's difficult to move it. The other thing too is because the trade wars been in effect now, is like so much production is shifted to other Asian countries that a lot of production capacity is full, and it's hard to actually find factories that can make your product too. I think that's a great point, because we have a lot of clients where now they have tariffs on products like up to 35% or more. Yeah. And if they would move that to Vietnam or another Asian country, they could save that. I mean, some tariffs are as low as 0%. So you can imagine if your product cost is suddenly reduced by 30%, and your competitor is paying that higher rate, or let's say you're paying the higher rate and your competitor is paying 30% lower. I mean, it's a pretty volatile situation. So
it sounds like that's another great service that you could provide. Absolutely. Because again, it's not just China; it's all throughout Asia.
And that's what we're doing for a lot of our corporate clients for the past 2 years is moving production out of China as much as
See, I'm
possible.
glad I asked the question because
Yeah.
that's interesting to know. Is that I think a lot of people. I mean, of course, you see a product and it says made in so and so, but that's good to know that. I guess like I don't know because when you think of like the typical thing sourced from another country, I don't know. At least to me, I think of China.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Of course.
So that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say like when potential clients contact us, they're always asking like, well, I mean, they're like, yeah, we're gonna make it in China. They don't really think too much of like Indonesia or Malaysia or too many other countries. But I think, and just the last point on the trade war is how to actually plan for it. Is you can't, you just have to go with what is the policy today, and so you can't just like plan to wait it out. I mean, I guess you could initially, but now we're like 2 years in, and what we're seeing so far is like it's still pretty hostile. Now, who knows? You know, maybe a week from now they come to an agreement of some sort.
Yeah, apparently it's like delayed, but they're supposed to come to an agreement of some kind from what I read.
Yeah. So, but it's lastly, like the trade war is just a much smaller issue of I think broader geopolitical issues at play.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
It seems there's definitely a lot of things that could affect what's actually going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're going to be wrapping up here soon. This is awesome. Like I didn't know anything about your story to be honest. I just knew you were.
Nobody does. I think you might be the first.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like you know.
I just knew that you were a guru
Yeah.
and sourcing bro. Like that's not the truth, man.
I like sourcing bro sounds cooler than guru. So.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping up, like, man, it's just so awesome. See, this is what I love. I love getting the story behind like what's led to what you're doing. Because again, as you could see, and even me, when I'm on a guest on another podcast, I see like when people start asking me these questions, I'm like, man, I never put those two and two together.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right.
But you had a very interesting story, and again, we talked about how the universe just led you to what you do now and led you to China.
Yeah.
What's really the thing? I mean, we kind of highlighted a little bit, but what's really your perspective on the mindset that really helped you become successful to where you are today? Like, what's that mindset that you think really helped propel you to where you are? Not a Jeopardy question, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. No, I'm just thinking through like all the different events that have led me to here.
Yeah.
I think it's just setting out your goals, right? I mean, if you don't actually know your goals, how can you possibly accomplish them, right?
Yeah.
So along the way, whether it was like when I started at Starbucks as a barista,
Yeah.
you know, like I'm going to be the store manager, and then you do it, right? So whatever, like actually laying out your goals, and then knowing that there's going to be obstacles and that's going to be uncomfortable, like especially like if you're going to source from China, it's going to be weird. Like you're gonna have to take a 12-hour flight to China, and you're gonna be in this culture in this society that's weird, and there's gonna you're gonna have to like invest money into your business and things like this. So I think like you have to expect that it's going to be challenging, it's going to make you uncomfortable, but where that gut intuition comes into play, like you just have to listen to it, just keep taking massive action, and that as you encounter things, just keep pivoting. I mean, I've hit 1,000 brick walls. I've tried other side hustles like in college and things that have failed. I mean, many business ideas that have failed. I mean, it was by no means like, oh, you know, I was here and there and then I started Sourcing Mojo and boom. No, like I've had plenty of LLCs and startups that I've tried to do, and it was like a lot of it was lack of seeing it through. So it's like starting it and then it's not really working. So it's probably a bad idea, you know, and just
so not
like,
finishing.
Yeah, not finishing, not seeing it through, not finishing. I mean, Andy Frisella talks about this all the time. You know, he always talks about like, if you put in the effort day in, day out, if you'll never quit, you will be successful. And that's so true. It doesn't matter what the business is. I mean, there is a way to be successful. It's just a matter of how hard are you willing to grind, and not just like dumb grind, but grind, think, commit, adjust, pivot, like all these things to make it come to fruition. And that's one of the biggest things that looking back on like ventures that I've tried in the past, and those were in my early days, like as an early entrepreneur, and still in kind of that sheep, like mainstream society mindset of like, yeah, I'm going to start a business. Oh, it didn't work out, you know, so it wasn't a good idea. No, you can't do like follow Andy Frisella and Ed Milet, and when you start that business, like you just go all in. Yeah.
I think it's the perception of success too. I mean, some people, like you said, like you've had many times where you've had businesses fail, LLCs fail, and all that stuff. But what was your perception of success? You know what I mean? Did you take it like, okay, this didn't work, and you know what? Maybe I want to try something different. But I took a lot from this failure. I learned from it. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people have that. Of course, we know this. A lot of people have that misconception of how failure actually plays a huge role. In fact, there's a lot of people who are actually really promoting out there, like, get used to failing, right?
Yeah.
Get used to failing, because that's only going to help you work towards your bigger goal. So where can everybody find you if they need anything, if they want to reach out to you, just have any questions, or if they want to, be a part of your services, you help them out and things like that.
So website for Sourcing Mojo, sourcingmojo.com.
How did you get that name, by the way, real quick?
Man, I just created it.
Yeah,
boom.
Just
God delivered it, and I took
I feel like
it,
you're just creating things out of the blue. I'm just thinking, like,
Yeah.
how did he come out with Sourcing Mojo? Sourcing, obviously, but Mojo, I like the name.
But yeah, and part of that, and Sourcing All Stars, I think, is a really cool brand too. A cool name.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is, like you said, like just experience. Now, like when I'm creating brands or doing things, like I have a lot of experience in a very creative and marketing background, and now it comes to me more easily.
Yeah.
Whereas without that experience, the last 12, 15 years, I wouldn't do that. So, sourcingmojo.com, the online program, sourcingallstars.com, which is also linked through our main website.
And that's live now?
Yeah,
the courses?
live.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
It's live. And on our online program, if you sign up for that, you automatically get a $500 credit to use for a Sourcing Mojo service.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, so not only will you become an expert, but then you can hire us for some service that you want, whatever that may be, and we can help you source. I'm on Instagram, Nate Sedgwick, and then Facebook as well. So yeah.
If there's a delay of him getting back to you, just know this guy's flying from China to the U.S. all the time, from Laguna Beach to his office. And where's your office? What city is it?
Xiamen, China.
China. So, dude, Nate, I appreciate you coming on the Parables, man.
Yeah.
Dude,
Pleasure, man.
Dude, guys, if you're listening to this episode, do me a favor. Share it with somebody you know that it could impact. Also, if you're listening to a particular episode, tag me and Nate. Let us know that you're listening. We will show you love back. Nate, I got to have you sign the infamous canvas.
Of course.
I'm known for. Yeah. And guys, we appreciate you guys so much. Parables Podcast with Nate Sedgwick. Appreciate you guys. We're out of here.